digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we are joined once again by Imre from Bossa Studios, and we have Amelia, who is now at Havas. Is that right?
That's right.
I'm up with the news. Woo!
I'm back again with a new title.
So I'm going to ask you to very briefly introduce yourselves and explain exactly who you are and what you do. And I'm going to start with you, Amelia, because you have changed it up.
Yes, so I very recently joined Havas as Innovations Manager for 18. 18 is a part of Havas, and the difference with 18 is that it focuses around innovation. That can be the bringing innovation within Havas, like working closer with startups, either directly using them as tools or getting startups in front of our clients to create wonderful things together. And of course, inspire innovation within Havas as well. So how we can be more innovative and leverage the startup culture within Havas. 18 sits horizontally, but also vertically within Havas. So I'm at Havas UK, I'm in London, but we have 18 hubs across the world, from Seoul to Bogota to LA, you name it, we're there. So we also, apart from my real life office, which is the one here in London, 60 St. Martin's Lane, I also have a virtual office on Slack, which connects me with my global colleagues from 18.
Wonderful. And Imre, why don't you tell us all about what you do at Bossa?
First of all, I have to say that this company, Havas, I have to say that their introduction package must be really good, because compared to you have just started, you gave us a really good overview. As far as startups go, I think it's both awesome and boring. I'm still at the same company. It's still Bossa Studios. I'm still a co-founder, and we still make video games.
It's not boring at all, Imre. And remember, some of our listeners might not have listened to one of the episodes that you was on before, so it's always good to introduce yourself again.
But this is now a reason for them to go back and listen to all of those episodes, because they were amazing.
Absolutely. They were all amazing. All of the episodes that you were in, especially Imre. But let us talk about innovation. Let us talk about the next step on, because I know that so far this year, and I apologise profusely to our listeners who've had to deal with this so far this year, every conversation seems to have in some way wavered towards VR. Be it from choice or just because of the meandering of the conversation. But today we are going to steer clear of VR, and so we are going to avoid the phrase VR from here on out, and we're going to move forward, and we're going to talk about instead what we think is slightly more interesting, which is AR, but also this thing that nobody's really been talking much about so far, but I think is going to become hugely important, is AI. And I suppose one of the first things that some people may think of when they hear this phrase AI or artificial intelligence is things like chatbots. Now, I know, Amelia, you have much to say about the chatbots. Would you like to give our listeners a little bit of an insight into what it really means?
For chatbots or for augmented reality?
Chatbots, because I know that you really had a lot to say.
Chatbots in augmented reality, which is even more exciting. Well, it's definitely, as you said, I thought when you said that we shouldn't speak about VR, we shouldn't mention VR, I thought, maybe we should say banana instead of VR, just to keep it interesting, like a code word.
Oh, no, I think we're going to start talking about this idea of the notion of virtual and really talk about what we see as the future for artificial intelligence and how it's going to really impact on the way that we do business and what business is going to emerge as a result of this AI that we see starting to kind of come forth.
I have to say, now that startup culture is mainstream and everybody thinks whatever geeks do must be super exciting, whenever a new trend comes along, like VR or chatbots, everybody they want to do it. It's like, what's your Snapchat strategy? What's your chatbot strategy? What's your VR strategy? Which doesn't really mean anything because, you have to have a strategy. And if a platform or a tool aligns to that, or you can translate a strategy to that new emerging platform, whatever, it's good. But, otherwise it's very artificial and not in an artificial intelligent way. It's just artificial, it's just not authentic, I think. And sometimes, of course, having like being a pioneer, it's important, but what's more important is to be thoughtful about what you're doing. What is it that you want to achieve with this new technology, and how do you want to be perceived? I mean, even if we take it from the point of Google wasn't the first search engine. And that's probably why so far it's the last, the last one standing at least. So, sometimes it's good to be innovative and wanting to be fresh and explore new trends. But I don't think that, this mindless translation, just do it because it's there. It's of benefit to anyone, really. And sometimes it's a disservice to technology as well, because we've seen a lot of trends died. So for instance, augmented reality, I remember I was covering it a lot early 2000 when I was working at the Next Web, and it was really a thing. But I think just because, a lot of brands kind of, just jumped on it and then used it as a PR tool and then kind of abandoned it, it created this, it caused to lose momentum and to lose focus and for people to jump onto the next trend, which didn't really mean that technology wasn't there yet or whatever. It was just like this, when you try to pursue something just for sake of pursuing it. So that sometimes can jam a trend. And I think, with chatbots too, like I checked out a lot of the chatbots that out there. And it's like, you remember back in the days when you used to make a call and you were like, if you like cheese, press 1. If you like butter, press 2. So it's the same thing, but it's like on text. So I don't see how that solves anything. I think chatbots are great, and I definitely see the value in bringing the conversation where people are. And yes, everybody, I text with my mom. I wouldn't want to talk to anyone else. If I don't bother to talk with my own mother, I prefer to text. But the point is, like, what are you going to say? You have this platform, but what are you going to say?
I am curious, though, from the perspective of, we know that there was the recent teen bot, or whatever they called it, that, left to the care of the internet and to the care of Twitter, became, was taught very quickly how to become a Nazi, spewing, hate-filled, pool of vitriol, essentially, because that's what users were teaching it to do. And I am curious from your perspective, Imre, when we look at any kind of new AI that's kind of reaching the consumer audience, whether or not there is perhaps this blasé attitude towards it, in as much as it is the thing to toy around with and to mess with and to essentially not take terribly seriously. Do you think that that's still a prevalent attitude?
Wow, that's a big question. I think it was said really well just earlier by Amalia that the thing is that people who are looking at new technologies and they are just saying, look, we have to jump on that bandwagon because that is the latest buzzword, which I heard at the latest whatever hipster conference I attended on company money. And so we have to do this because everyone's doing it. That's sometimes it can be okay, right? I'm sure that the first companies who introduced having a phone in their office, that was a great thing. So I don't mind someone having a chatbot on whatever chat application they're using and talking to the audience that way. That is fine. But often it becomes, as it was said, artificial and superficial, and that doesn't help. The real push and the real creativity comes from people who don't look at technology as technology, but they look at it as an experience, and they ask the question, what technology I need to be able to provide this next groundbreaking experience, and how, doesn't matter if it's customers or B2C or B2B, how I'm going to provide something different, what it is. And the answer usually is you can't do that because technology is not available. And then they say, no, I'm going to try it anyway. And this attitude fails until they hit a critical mass, when suddenly the technology is ready enough and advanced enough to do that. And the AI is getting there. So now we are seeing things which are doing that. There was a fantastic article, and I don't remember now who wrote it. It was a really short blog post, but it said, that the future of startups and the future of basically anything is going to be take X and add AI. And
Yes.
it was so true. And I'm thinking the number of people who are thinking about their next, startup, basically that's what they should think. They basically say, okay, take anything you like and add AI. And then there is a startup opportunity there. Now, is it misused by some people? Yes. As I said, some people misuse it because they just don't understand. I want to jump on the bandwagon. Some people misuse it because they fundamentally misunderstand what the technology is able and unable to do. But equally, I think what we should concentrate on is that there are a lot of companies who do amazing work, both on the technology side and on the experience side. Some great stuff coming up. So yes, there is a lot of me too, superficial thing, but there is also some pretty exciting development.
I'm curious though, from your perspective on this, Imre, whether or not you think that perhaps part of the issue is the general consensus of understanding of what AI actually is, in as much as for many, many people, when you say AI, they think, oh my gosh, complex, needs to be really, have a depth of complexity and be intelligent and do lots of really complicated stuff. And, they're thinking about things like the, chess playing, AI that beat, the world champion, the grandmaster at chess, or, they're thinking about these complex Watson style systems that are, able to compute quite a vast amount of data. But we also forget that there is this kind of other end of AI, this kind of weak AI or loose AI as it's known, that doesn't need to have to be necessarily complex. It is really just about taking away fundamental key decision-making processes from the human equation and to remove something that is quite, repetitive or doesn't require a huge amount of heavy lifting from a human to be able to pass that on to an artificial intelligence. So things like scheduling of meetings, for example, doesn't have to be overly complex. Yet it is something that once we remove this particular issue from our lives, it does actually free us up a little bit to be able to focus on some things that might be more important in our lives. So I'm curious to understand from your perspective whether you think that there is perhaps this misconception about what AI really is about and whether or not something is classified as AI in the mind of the consumer, in the mind of the public.
The problem is, well, no, actually, no, it's not a problem. It's the idea is that we have, and a lot of people have this image of AI, and we develop our image of AI from books and films and basically sci-fi. And so you have this image, and I'm thinking, well, actually, there are intelligent road crossings, where it counts the number of cars and calculates what is the likelihood of how many cars will come in, and so it decides how long a red or a green light is going to go, etc. That is an intelligent system, but it's not really because someone wrote down the numbers and said, if it is more than 5, then add a bit more to the green. So, ultimately someone somewhere sat in the back and made those decisions. As of today, no computer has been making a creative decision. What AI at the moment does is that it went from I can implement very simple conditions. Then it went to the level where it said, I can implement super complex condition, analyze and act on super complex conditions, which a human being wouldn't be able to comprehend all of that data. Then the next stage goes to the level where, for example, in cancer treatment, it is now being experimented with and some places used, is that it looks at so many treatments that when the doctor says, I believe the treatment should be this, the computer, the AI can come back and say, well, actually, my opinion is that if you change that to 5 milligram more, then you have 10% higher chance of a recovery. And that, again, the AI was not making any creative decision. It's just simply handling a huge amount of data, but the creativity came from the programmer who created it. Latest AI now getting to the point where it can semi-intelligently look at the database, and instead of just going at the database with brute force, it can know where to start to look. But again, these are just superficial. There's no creative decision there. So, and I think that's why for a lot of people, when they look at AI, there's a bit of a disappointment because they think, well, why can't the AI do anything more? But we're getting there. We are, I think we're getting there. And the bigger achievement of the Go beating Google AI was when we look back at Deep Blue, which beat Kasparov in chess. At that time, it was basically about how many calculations you can push in, and just shoving these huge numbers of calculations, and therefore beat the chess player. When it gets to Go, the number of variations is so much higher, that even bigger. So the real challenge, the real victory of that AI was twofold. One is that the brute force calculation, and then the other side is that it could understand which calculations to do first before do others. And that made it able to get through like huge numbers of calculations. Instead of having to do billions and billions, it only had to do millions, which it was able to do.
I think the shift of our perception towards artificial intelligence is happening very rapidly. As artificial intelligence becomes accessible to the masses without even realizing that they're using artificial intelligence. What I mean by that is, up to now, it was artificial intelligence was something, dark and mysterious for crazy scientists, science fiction, and people in Japan. But now, you have a bunch of startups that are like Squarespace for chatbots. So you can create something using essentially artificial intelligence without even using a line of code, so anybody can do it. It's a little bit like the internet, which was like, early 90s, you would have the movies. There was like a mysterious hacker typing some stuff and things would happen and like, what's there, what's happening. But then, we had WordPress, we had Blogger, now Squarespace again, and, everybody can set up a website, and these people don't even think that they're using something which is built out of code, because it's like drag and drop. They don't see it. They don't realize it. So in their mind, they're not thinking that, oh my God, I'm building a website like with code, because they don't see the code. So I think the same thing is going to happen with the artificial intelligence. And you can see it like all the moms love Alexa of Amazon. Like, if you look at the best blogs, like the best mom blogs are all about how much I love Alexa. It's like the nanny I wish I always had, because kids interact with it because they don't think they interact necessarily. I mean, they know they interact with a machine. They know they don't interact with a person, but it's a different kind of interaction. They don't understand, and the parents let it happened. Like, parents, when it came to kids using the internet, were more scared, especially, earlier on when parents weren't all over Facebook. They were afraid. They were like, what's happening, this mysterious world and all that. And now that your parents are on Facebook all day, it's becoming easier for them to understand what you're doing there all day long. So I think the same is gonna be the shift with artificial intelligence. In artificial intelligence, it's gonna infiltrate our day-to-day lives without us realizing. So although we may still talk about, oh my God, the rise of the machine, what is gonna happen, we will still be using it without even realizing. And that would be the best kind of way of adopt it in our day-to-day lives, I think.
Look, I mean, people adapt new technologies by convenience, right? Like, they use email because it's just convenient. It's more convenient than it is to send a post or a pigeon message, right? And so the same is going to happen here. But it's interesting with chatbots, for example, that someone I know got very excited about chatbots. And I said, well, the chatbot is basically a natural language processing, some sort of a sentiment analysis and a database of answers. And they almost looked at me angrily that I just basically pointed out that the rabbit was in the hat the entire time.
Yeah.
And they got really mad at me. And I was like, well, it's not my fault. That's just how it works. But it's interesting what you're saying about adoption. You know what, to me, and again, that's why I'm talking about the experiences, because the technology itself, even though it is absolutely mind-blowing, the really interesting what people do with it, with the experience they design. One of the most disruptive AIs which we're going to experience is self-driving cars. It is going to cause all sorts of upheaval, both in positive and negative ways, both in people's personal lives and how they handle their everyday life, but also in jobs. Just think of this. What's going to happen the first time a self-driving car kills someone? What's going to happen the first time when a major cab company says, or the public transport says, I'm going to fire every single driver because I'm going to replace everyone with self-driving cars? So, there's going to be some very upsetting moments, and it's going to be really difficult to handle them because you can't stop progress. But there will be very real losers on the human side against the AIs.
I tend to agree in as much as, first of all, I'm just going to go back to the comments about creative use of AI and just, for the record, throw it out there because I'm sure somebody listening will go, but hold on a minute. And that is that I know that there is somebody, and I forget the name of the agency, who have appointed a robot / AI to be their creative director. And make creative decisions based on existing historical campaigns, etc., and so forth, to decide what campaigns they're going to go forwards with. So
that sounds so.
Just for the record,
I almost used a rude word, but that sounds to me. I'm sorry. Is this company by any chance based in Shoreditch?
No, I
think it was in Asia. Yes.
Yeah, pretty sure they're in Asia, but it is a big.
That's a PR story. That is so not true.
I'm just putting it out there because I know somebody listening is going to go, but hold on a minute.
Well, in any case, most ads go unnoticed, like with ad blockers on the rise and all that. You can have a bot like throwing random apps to people.
Just saying, I'm putting it out there. But the other thing I want to comment on is this whole self-driving cars thing, because I think that there are a lot of really interesting factors around this. And first of all, just because I don't actually own a driver's license, I have never bothered to learn how to drive. And I now feel vindicated that it's possible that in my lifetime, I will never need to learn how to drive. So I will be entirely vindicated for not having bothered to learn. But my point is this, is that with the whole self-driving cars thing, I think, yes, we're going to see this whole revolutionary shift in the same way that we saw with things like the coal mining industry or, other industries in the past, factories making, cotton and cloth and lace and things like this that became, revolutionized with the advent of machinery. And I think we're going to see that same shift. But the other thing that people haven't necessarily spoken about as much is actually the shift it's going to have on us as a culture. And by that I mean things like just basic city planning is going to change. Suddenly we don't need all these huge massive car parks anymore because all the cars are self-driving. So when the car is not in use, it can drive somewhere else and it's never going to have to stop unless it's actually filling up or recharging or whatever it is it's going to do. But ultimately, it doesn't need to be sitting in your garage anymore. And this idea of individual ownership of a car is going to be something that is left very much to the old collectors and the people who really want to physically, tangibly own a car. But for this younger generation, this kind of digital nomad generation, they're really not going to be that fussed about individual ownership of a vehicle. And instead, they're going to be open to this idea of community ownership of transportation. So I am curious about, in that context, from an automated vehicle perspective, how we see that applying into other areas that AI could potentially impact. And I'm putting this one to you, Amelia. What do you think is going to be that thing that AI could significantly have an impact on, whether it is smart cities or medical health or whatever that thing is? What do you think it's going to be? Or what would you like it to be?
I definitely see this coming as well, with smart cities, connected homes and all that. I think it's gonna make some things very easier, in terms of, conserving energy. And as you said, when it comes to traffic, to safety on the roads and all that. But on the other hand, what is I find a little bit scary, and I think people will need to find new ways to preserve it, is the don't know part of life. I think especially teenagers, I was in a very good place where when I was a teenager, I could start going somewhere, but I just wanted to go, but not necessarily where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. But now whenever I'm like somewhere, unless I'm walking, like if I take an Uber, I need to put where I'm going. Otherwise, I can't book a car, just drive around, It's the same, I think, with a self-driving car, get in and say, hey, Google, drive me. Well, I don't know where to drive me exactly, but just start driving and I'll figure it out on the way. So
you never know, there might be scenic routes.
In general, with the home as well, you have to order at specific times. I guess, your fridge will be filling up itself. But, what about when you want to eat, but you don't know what you want to eat? So I think, that need for the don't know space, which is also the discovery space. I think that's where you get the best kind of ideas and when you get the best kind of impulses. So I think, people will find new ways to provide room for that impulsive behavior. And I think that's almost what the marketplace of the future will be. Like now we're talking about experience, but maybe in the future it will be more about, being impulsive and being like free. And because we are right now gearing towards a very effective and productive way of life. But life is beyond that, Life is also about being messy. So I think, maybe the high-end experience of the future will be like a room where you can be actually be messy.
And Imre, what's your thoughts on this?
First of all, Amelia, I really, I like what you're talking about. There's a lot of very clever stuff there. Look, the way I see it is that, and I know you said let's not talk about the self-driving cars, but the reality is that when I think just recently the first time they drove trucks across Europe, and it was a whole convoy of automatically driven cars. And what people seem to, again, they have to take into mind is that when a truck rides through, something like 60 to 90% of the cost is caused by the human sitting in the truck. And so you have to ask yourself, what's going to happen? These people are going to lose their jobs. That's awful. But at the same time, you think, well, hang on a minute. We can use this energy if we adapt. So I think we are at I don't want to sound too dramatic, but we are at a fork. And in one way, we can go with basically getting medieval and building walls around countries and locking ideas out and trying to say that how nice it was in the 80s and 90s. And let's go back to that and limit access to data and all that, which we see in multiple countries, unfortunately, even in the West. And the other alternative is that we say, no, we have to take models after those snarkily often called millennials. And I really don't like that term because they inherited a messed up planet. They're doing the best they can with that. And we as a society, we can decide, no, actually there is enough money for a universal salary and there is enough money to allow that messiness that Amelia was talking about and saying, we can automate all of these jobs. And yes, for some people, it means, you know what, you get a base salary and you don't have to do anything else. And that's fine. But I'm also hoping that that's going to encourage people to start crazy things. In video gaming, for example, I can tell you that the indie culture and all the independent games, all this creativity, and not just in creativity in art and in game design and how visually the games look, but also creativity in business models, all that came after the big crash of the games industry just a couple of years before. So what happened that all of those people who suddenly lost their jobs in the games industry, some of them decided to go some other fields, but some of them said, you know what, I am going to reinvent games industry from scratch and I'm going to come up with all this cool stuff, which then became on its own right huge. So my hope is that we're going to choose the latter. And we again, and I don't want to get too esoterical here, but we as a society, we opt the messy route and we say, no, we want to give enough playing field for people to experiment with the craziest ideas because that's how innovation is born.
It's interesting. It feels like we're on the cusp of another revolution, whether we're aware of it or not. We're kind of in the thick of it right now. But What I will say is this: I want to thank you both for joining us today on this Digital Jam session. But as always, we like to give our listeners a way to be able to follow you and find out a little bit more about what you're up to. So if you would be so good as to share with us your social media handle of choice. I'm going to start with you, Imre.
My Twitter is at Imre Jele, and my company is bostastudios.com, and from there you can find all of our awesome games.
Wonderful, thank you. And Amelia, why don't you share with us your social media handle of choice?
So you can find me at Amalaki, which is AMA and then Lucky, as I'm so lucky to be joining Digital Jam so often. And then you can find out more about 18 Hubs, following 18 Hubs on Twitter. And you can also find us on Medium, because we have published a very interesting post, especially around the digital darling VR, as we also have a partnership with UCLA for our 18 hubs in LA. So definitely some interesting read around that topic there. Wonderful. Hollywood style, you know.
Well, I have to say I'm awfully proud of us for managing to avoid any conversation around VR today. Thank you so much. And I want to say once again, thank you for listening to this Digital Jam session. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review. I have been Tanya, your friendly host and the founder of Digital Jam. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. DigitalJamSessions.com